Hello my friends, and how are you doing? I tested MidJourney video quite extensively. I prepared 60 clips for you that I will show you right now without commentary, and then I selected a few of them to give you some commentary right after that. Let's get started. So here's my commentary on a selection of these clips, but before that I also want to point out that QWERTY is having a sale right now, having a link below the video if you want to check that out. So let's start with the first clip, which is this water pouring into a glass. What I like here is that the glass actually filling up and the action is kind of working. I feel like the water itself though is a little bit too oily from its consistency. Even though it is a slow motion, I feel like it just doesn't quite look like water, but still it is an interesting clip. In the next one I wanted to try the same thing, and here I have whiskey and I wanted to have the ice in the glass. You can remember maybe that it was pretty difficult to create whiskey on the rocks as an image. Here it actually worked really well, although I have to point out that I asked for whiskey with ice in the glass, so that's a little bit different maybe, but you can see that there is pouring going on and it is following the ice cubes in the glass. That is pretty interesting, even though the liquid dynamics might not be there 100%. For the next clip, I will zoom in and slow down this a little bit, because the important, interesting thing here is while he's putting on his sunglasses, the arms are bending to the shape of his head, and I found that really impressive for that clip, which overall also looks very good. Then we have this clip here, and what I wanted to test here is to have this macro shot with this very shallow depth of field, and the interesting part here is that the sharpness, the focus is actually following along the camera movement. But not only that, the important part here is if you look, especially if the asparagus, that when it becomes sharp, when it gets into focus, the shape of the asparagus heads are not changing, they're just getting in focus, and I feel like that is very impressive. In this next shot, this might be an interesting challenge for you. I could not get the model to fly through any kind of this kind of opening here, like the handle of a cup or between the fingers of a hand to go to the other side. I could not make that happen. Maybe you can do that, but I found that's an interesting limitation. The next shot here is of the pouring of this kind of rainbow colored liquid, and what I really like here is this is extended multiple times. This is why that shot is so long, but look on how consistently this is pouring the color. Even with the rotation, it is keeping the color, it is keeping the shape of the poured liquid, but also the liquid keeps flowing while it is even inside of the dish. I really like that. Here we have another shot that is not only an impressive image of a hand with light on it created by MidJourney, but then also animating the fingers. Now there could be more movement in the fingers, of course, but for what it is very impressive. One thing I do not like is the shadows in the background, because they do not link up with the actual finger movement, but the lights on the fingers and the finger movement, and that they are not morphing out of shape, is still a very impressive feat. Next we have here this shot of the astronaut walking through the landscape. Again, this is very impressive, and for me the impressive part here is that it's so cinematic and it looks really good, and the movement of the background fits for the perspective, so that this unlimited tier, the pro tier of MidJourney, where you can create as many videos as you want, might be an awesome tool for filmmakers. Just imagine, for $48 a month, you can create as many scenes as you want as a filmmaker. I have lenses for my camera that cost $1,500, $1,700, and here for $48 you can create these kind of scenes. That is insane, and they really look good. If you have the imagination, I think you can do a lot with this. The next shot here is about this lava lamp, and here I wanted to test the physical understanding that the model has. And right now, especially, I feel like with liquids, the understanding is not quite there. It needs some improvement. As you can see, it's kind of doing something, and then it's also overflowing, which is also interesting because it's not staying contained inside of the lava lamp. However, one important part here is to point out is the liquid is not coming out of the side of the lava lamp, it's just coming out of the top of the lava lamp. And it's still impressive, even though it doesn't really understand that it should be closed on the top. Next we have here this zombie shot, and what I like about that is when the camera is turning around, the extension of the space and the extension of the crowd that is happening is very consistent, but also the crowd in the background is staying very consistent while this camera movement is going on, and you see this kind of like handheld camera. So again, this is really, really nice. The next shot here also is an interesting test. I wanted to have this kind of tilt shift effect. Now here the impressive part for me is that the figures in the foreground, they are walking into the focus and then out of the focus, and it's consistent with where the focus is and where the blur is starting. So again, it's really interesting that the model can do that. Here we have a shot of this saxophone playing frog, and I like how consistent the frog is holding the saxophone. It's staying in his mouth, the hands are staying on the buttons and playing. So all of that is pretty good. Now one thing that is also important to point out here is that MidJourney has style reference. So once you have found the style reference that this image was created with, and you get that information with every image you create, you basically have the ability to create more images in the same style, and that might enable you to actually have consistent style throughout a short film that you're creating with MidJourney. It's pretty beautiful. I also wanted to have a look at this jellyfish shot that is very impressive for the consistency of the different elements, and you can see these jellyfish are very detailed and they stay consistent throughout the movement, not just of the jellyfish but also of the camera. One thing I don't like about this shot is that they are all moving in sync with this kind of like swimming pumping motion, so that is not ideal, even though I ask in the prompt that they are not in sync, but I guess it's just something that AI models do. And then as a last commentary, we have here this moon shot. Now I wanted to know if it can do that moon movement, and it actually can. It's very nice. One thing I don't like about that is that the moon is going straight up, so you might have to do some more prompting acrobatics to get the moon to get to the side. However, what I really like is how the moon is creating this kind of changing reflection inside of the building. So that is still very impressive, and overall the consistency is very nice, and I'm also very happy that the moon is actually round. Now let me know what you think about these scenes, what your favorite scene was, and also I want to invite you on Sunday. We're going to do another testing round where you can suggest prompts that I will do in the live stream, and we can check out other challenges for this AI model. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye.